My name is Margaret Holloway, and I've worked in corporate finance for 32 years. Not just any job, not clocking in and out like some faceless number. I built relationships. I solved crisis when the men in suits panicked. And I mentored, truly mentored, dozens of young professionals who now run departments across the country. I didn't do it for praise, I did it because someone had to care. 5 years ago, I took a job at Axton and Holt Industries, one of those legacy companies that looks shiny on the surface, but has rot crawling beneath the marble. I was brought in to stabilize their budgeting operations. Nothing fancy. But once I got inside, it was like discovering a house with gold knobs and termites in every beam. Still, I stayed. I fixed. I listened. I didn't fight for recognition. I fought for results. That's probably why I caught the attention of Roland Axton, the CEO. He was a shark, but he had an odd way of respecting people like me. Women who didn't play games, at least at first. Then his son, Nathan Axton, came on board. Nathan was untested, that's the polite word, entitled, impatient. But more dangerous than that, he was performative. He wore ambition like a mask, impressive at a glance, but paper thin underneath. Roland wanted me to guide him. Not a formal mentorship, mind you. I wasn't given any extra pay or title, just a quiet do this for me, Margaret, over coffee. I should have said no. I didn't. Nathan was cold to me from the start. Polite enough in meetings, but quick to dismiss. Quick to condescend, especially when others were listening. Still, I did what I was asked. I walked him through multi-channel forecasting, risk allocation, internal audit systems. He absorbed knowledge quickly, but never acknowledged where he got it. He started presenting ideas I'd shown him word for word in leadership meetings. Roland smiled proudly. My name came up. I let it slide, telling myself this was temporary, that surely the CEO would see what was happening. But Roland saw only what he wanted to see, a sun suddenly rising. Then came the day Nathan was promoted. Officially, he was now Vice President of Strategic Development. Practically, he was my superior. No warning, no conversation. He walked into my office that morning with the new title stitched into his tailored jacket. He leaned against the doorframe like a king. "Thanks for all the help," he said, that same empty grin he always wore. "Couldn't have done it without you." Then he winked and walked out. That was the first time I truly knew what was coming. 3 weeks later, I was fired. No explanation. Just a brief email from HR and an escort out of the building. They thought I'd be stunned, but I'd seen it coming. I'd seen it the moment Roland stopped looking me in the eye, and Nathan started copying my emails into his proposals. I wasn't shocked. I was furious. They underestimated me, and they had no idea about the backup files I kept, the recordings, the signatures I never erased, or what I planned to do with them next. 2 days after I was fired, I sat in my kitchen staring at the same ceramic mug I used every morning for 10 years. It felt heavier now, like it carried the weight of everything I didn't say. The truth was, I stayed too long at Axton and Halt because I'd convinced myself that integrity still mattered. That if I just kept doing good work, someone would notice, that someone had been Roland once. He'd hired me during a financial storm, praised my stabilizing presence in a room full of arrogance. I'd thought we were on the same side. He'd lost his wife years before, cancer, and back then there were quiet moments when he let his guard down, talked about legacy and honor like he actually meant it. That version of Roland hasn't spoken in years. But I wasn't fired just because Nathan was climbing the ladder. It was strategic. Roland saw what was happening and let it unfold, and that was harder to swallow than the betrayal itself. I opened my laptop, a personal machine I never used for company officially. I'd officer labeled Autumn. Inside audio recordings from one-on-one meetings with Nathan, annotated with tracked edits, emails I'd blind carbon copied to myself, complete with time-stamped footnotes. Not illegal, but not exactly encouraged. I wasn't proud of the surveillance, but trust me, when you've been dismissed mid-project more than once for a younger man's promotion, you learn to prepare. I played a recording. Nathan's voice filled the room. "Yeah, but if I say it came from you, my father won't take it seriously. Just let me present it. We'll both win." That was 2 months before I was let go. I clicked another file, an internal memo I drafted, rebranded, and sent under Nathan's name. His version was riddled with formatting errors, mistakes I corrected before sending it to the CFO myself, knowing Nathan would claim the credit. I was right. At the time, I told myself it didn't matter, that my job was to make the company better, not collect applause. But applause isn't just noise. Sometimes it's the only thing keeping you visible. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a message popped up. A clipped, familiar voice. Margaret, it's Lewis from Risk. Can we talk? Lewis Berryman. He wasn't a friend, but he wasn't a stranger either. One of the few. People at the company who'd ever questioned Nathan's rise. Quiet, observant, always cautious, but smart. Too smart to leave a trail without a reason. I called him back. I think I know why they pushed you out, he said. And it's worse than you think. They're using your financial projections to inflate investor confidence. Numbers they don't understand, and if they collapse, it's going to look like your work. That was when the second betrayal hit. Not just eraser, not just replacement. They were going to let me take the fall if it all went under. That night, I didn't sleep. I printed copies, duplicated drives, backed everything up 3 different ways. I didn't know yet what I was going to do, but I knew this much. If they wanted a scapegoat, they picked the wrong woman. Lewis met me the next morning at a little coffee shop in Quincy, neutral territory, far from the city, the kind of place where the barista calls everyone Han and refills your cup without asking. He looked tired, nervous, like a man who'd been watching the company burn from the inside out and had finally decided to say something. But I wasn't going to trust him just because he reached out. Trust was a luxury I'd buried. They've rerun your models, he said without looking at me. But they changed the assumptions, increased revenue projections by 30%. On paper, it looks incredible, like the company's about to skyrocket, but it's fiction, and it has your original signature block. I sat still. I felt my heartbeat in my throat. They're courting 2 new institutional investors, he added. Nathan's been pitching them personally, using decks based on your old materials. They think I endorsed those numbers? I asked, my voice low. He nodded. That's why I called. I don't think you know how deep this goes. I had suspected fraud, but now I saw it clearly. This wasn't just about betrayal or being replaced. They were building a lie on my back. And if that lie cracked, it wouldn't just be my name ruined. It could lead to legal action, investigation, a permanent black mark on a career I spent decades building. I stared down at my hands, the veins more visible these days. The gold wedding band I never removed, though I'd been widowed for years. My husband Peter had been an auditor. Sharp, ethical, practical. I could almost hear his voice now. Truth doesn't defend itself, Maggie. You've got to show your receipts. I pulled out a flash drive and pushed it across the table. Here's what I've got. Original documents, voice recordings, project logs, time-stamped. Lewis took it, but didn't pocket it immediately. What are you hoping to do? I'm not sure yet, I admitted. But they're not walking away from this clean. He hesitated. If you go public, they'll smear you, say you're bitter, disgruntled. You were let go for performance. They've probably already planted that. I gave a bitter laugh. They've already taken everything but my dignity. If they try to take that too, I'll make sure they regret it. Lewis nodded slowly. There's something else. Roland knows. He's not some blind father playing favorites. He's on the quarterly calls approving the decks. He's signing off. That hit deeper than I expected. I remembered the early days when he'd pull me into his office just to ask, "Does this feel right to you?" Now he was rubber-stamping falsified reports. Knowing full well I was the one they'd use as cover, I left that coffee shop feeling like my ribs were made of ice. But under the fear was something sharper. Resolve. That night I reached out to someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Camille Davenport, a retired SEC compliance officer I once worked with on a merger in Chicago. She was blunt, skeptical, and brilliant, and she owed me a favor. "You think you've got enough for an inquiry?" I asked over the phone. She didn't pause. "If even half of what you're saying is on record, this isn't just an inquiry. This is criminal liability." That's when I started building the timeline. Every email, every signature, every whisper from Nathan, every silence from Roland, a forensic history of betrayal. Let them call me bitter. Let them think I wouldn't fight back. They had no idea who they'd buried. Camille met me in person 2 days later at her house in Evanston. She lived in a modest brick colonial with ivy creeping up the side, the kind of place that whispered steadiness, not flash. That was always her way. She answered the door in jeans, and a cardigan, hair still clipped in that same blunt bob she wore in the 9S when we handled that bloodbath of a merger in Chicago. If anyone knew how to smell rot in a corporate structure, it was her. We spent 4 hours going through everything. I'd brought duplicates, printed timelines, even cross-referenced board meeting transcripts with internal memos. She barely spoke until I was done. "You realize," she said finally, "if I take this anywhere, it won't be a private battle. SEC enforcement isn't a whisper campaign. This will explode. Press, depositions, careers burned." I nodded. "I don't care about my reputation anymore. I care about the truth." She narrowed her eyes. "Don't lie to me, Margaret. You care about your name. You should, because they're going to come for it first." I took a deep breath. Then I need to get ahead of them. She leaned back in her chair, exhaling through her nose. "Okay, first thing we do is separate what's fact from what's inference. No assumptions, no guesses, only what can be verified." "Done." "That's all here," I said, tapping a thick binder. She opened it, skimming. "And we need a firewall between you and this data. A legal buffer. You need counsel." "I can't afford it," I said flatly. "Then you go to someone who's got a reason to want the same thing you do." She was right. But who? I didn't have allies in that company anymore. Most of the ones who had integrity had either been pushed out or were too scared to say anything. That night, I thought about it for hours until a name came to me like a flicker in the dark. Carla Vance. She'd been with the firm's investor relations team for 7 years, and while we weren't close, I remembered her challenging Nathan once in a board prep call. She had guts, and she knew how to read a room, especially the kind where people lied with spreadsheets. I messaged her. It took her 12 hours to reply. Her email was short. "I can't say anything here. Meet me noon, the old church parking lot in Arlington." It felt like something out of a spy movie, but I went. She was already waiting in her car when I arrived. She looked tired, older than I remembered. But when I opened the door and sat beside her, her eyes met mine with something rare these days, fear and resolve. "I'm still inside," she said. "I've seen what they're doing. Nathan's got people rewriting internal numbers before they're even approved. And Roland. He signs without reading. Can you prove it?" She nodded. "I've got screen captures, metadata. They think we don't know how to track changes. They're wrong." I looked at her carefully. "Why haven't you spoken up?" "Because I have 2 kids and a mortgage," she whispered. "And they're ruthless." "Margaret, you already know that." I did, but I also knew something else now. I wasn't alone. "Camille wants to go to the SEC. I said, "We need your help. Not testimony, just data, copies, dates, anything that backs this up." Carla sat in silence for a long moment. Then she reached into her bag and handed me a flash drive. "I shouldn't be doing this," she whispered. "But if I don't, and this falls apart, I'll be part of it too." We sat in that car for 5 minutes more, not speaking. I left with shaking hands, but for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel powerless. Camille called me the next morning, her voice crisp as ever. "I've reviewed Carla's drive. It's solid. Embedded timestamps, access logs, original file trails. They doctored reports 3 days before the last investor call deliberately. That's actionable." I pressed the phone closer. "What's our next move?" "We go quiet," she said. "We finish the timeline. We pull together everything that links your original reports to the doctored versions, but we do not file yet. Not until we have a shield in place." "What kind of shield?" "Press," she said. "Reputation is armor. If they think they can ruin you behind closed doors, they will. But if your story is out there, if your name is on the front end of this, it's much harder to discredit you after the fact." The idea terrified me. I'd spent my life avoiding the spotlight. But Camille was right. They were already painting a picture of me as bitter, difficult, resistant to the company's evolving direction. I'd heard that language before. It always came before someone was erased. "Do you know anyone?" I asked. "I know a reporter," she said. "Sandra Peak. Used to be with the Times, now freelances for a few investigative outlets. She owes me a favor and she hates corporate fraud more than I do." I didn't answer right away. Camille filled the silence. "Margaret, if you wait until they filed a legal narrative, you'll be defending your life from the back foot. I'm telling you, lead now or they'll write the ending for you." 2 days later, I met Sandra Peak in the corner booth of a diner in Joliet. She was younger than I expected, maybe late 30s, with a soft southern accent that disappeared when she got serious. And when I started talking, she got very serious. She recorded everything, asked questions no one had before about tone, power dynamics, language used in meetings. She didn't just want the facts. She wanted the human shape of the betrayal. What it felt like to be erased in slow motion, to be used and discarded, to be told implicitly that your experience was no longer relevant, because it couldn't be monetized by someone younger. By the end of the conversation, her expression had hardened. "This story isn't just about finance," she said. "It's about systemic dismissal, age, gender, exploitation." "I don't care what frame you use," I said. "I just want the truth out." She smiled, but not kindly. "That makes two of us." I left her with copies of key files and Camille's contact info. It wasn't all the evidence. We weren't stupid, but it was enough to draw a line in the sand. Enough to start the burn. Camille called me that night. She's drafting and she's angry. That's good. But I couldn't sleep. Not because I doubted myself, but because I knew what came next. They would find out. They would retaliate. And I didn't know who would turn against me when the house lights came on. Sandra's article dropped 3 days later. It wasn't buried in some backwater blog. It landed on the front page of the Capital Ledger Sunday feature section under the headline, "The Woman." They tried to erase inside the quiet fraud at Axton and Holt. The subtitle was sharper. How a decorated financial veteran was pushed out, scapegoated, and nearly ruined until she fought back. It spread fast. Within hours, former colleagues were sharing it online, tagging each other. My name was trending in ways it never had before. Not with praise, but with noise, sympathy, anger, and doubt. Plenty of doubt. Camille called me before noon. "It's working. The phones are ringing. I've already had 2 reporters call me for confirmation, but stay offline. Don't read the comments." Of course I did. And of course I shouldn't have. She's just bitter she got passed over. Classic disgruntled employee story happens every day. Let's see her actual proof before we praise her as some kind of hero. But it was the internal fallout that hit faster than I'd expected. That evening, Lewis texted me. "They're calling it a slanderous attack from a former underperforming employee." Nathan's livid. HR just issued a company-wide memo denying all allegations. The next day, Carla didn't show up to work. Camille tried to call me. They're circling the wagons. They'll discredit first, then isolate. Standard playbook. And then the envelope came. Couriered. No return address. Thick legal letterhead and language designed to threaten, not warn. Axton and Holt hereby demands the immediate cessation of all defamatory claims being made by Miss Margaret Holloway. Dissemination of confidential information constitutes a breach of her post-employment obligations. Legal action will be pursued if public statements are not immediately retracted. I handed it to Camille, hands trembling. She skimmed it once. Empty bluff. They don't want to sue you. A lawsuit means discovery. They'd have to show everything. They're hoping this scares you. Silent. I was silent, but not scared. Not yet. "What did shake me came that afternoon?" Sandra called, her voice sharp and unusually short. "Someone leaked my number. I've been getting anonymous calls all morning. One told me to back off if I want to keep writing." Another just breathed on the line. I sat down. "I'm sorry. This wasn't supposed to stop," she said. "This happens. It means we struck something real, but it also means you need to be careful now. You're in it, Margaret. All the way." And she was right, because that night I caught a car idling across the street from my house. No plates, no lights, just sitting there watching. I didn't sleep. I stayed at Camille's. And as we sat in her study, laptop open, highlighters strewn across the table, she looked at me and said, "They're getting reckless. That's when people make mistakes. We press forward now. We file with the SEC." I nodded, my throat tight. "Are we ready?" "We're close, but I need Lewis. If he can corroborate anything tied to internal processes, it tightens the noose." So I called him, and when he answered, his voice was low, almost flat. "I'm out," he said. "What do you mean?" "They've moved me. Out of risk, reassigned to vendor compliance. It's a closet. No systems access, no authority. They know I talked. Lewis, I have 2 kids, Margaret. I can't lose this job. I'm sorry, I can't help anymore." I didn't blame him, but the hole he left was undeniable. Camille exhaled sharply when I told her, "We still move, but understand this. Every step forward, they're going to try to peel someone off." I looked her in the eye. Then, "They'll learn who they didn't fire soon enough." The day we filed with the SEC, it rained hard. A gray, relentless kind of rain that soaked you through no matter how fast you ran. Camille insisted on walking the package into the federal Dropbox herself, even though we submitted it digitally too. "Some things deserve to be witnessed," she said, water dripping from her umbrella. Inside that envelope were 3 months of our lives. Spreadsheets, voice memos, time-stamped drafts, metadata logs, Carla's screenshots, even a copy of Sandra's article. It was, as Camille called it, undeniable architecture. Afterward, we didn't celebrate. We just sat in silence at a diner, coffee cooling between us. I thought I'd feel relieved, I said, watching the rain smear neon across the windows. You will, Camille replied. Eventually, right now, your body's still waiting to be hit again. And she was right, because the hit came sooner than expected. That night, I got a call from an old contact, Naomi Driscoll, a senior audit manager I hadn't spoken to in over a year. She sounded tense. Margaret, this isn't a courtesy call, she said. They're opening an internal investigation, not on them, on you. What? They've drafted a misconduct report, claimed you falsified your own records before you left. They're digging up old performance reviews, pulling people into HR interviews. I gripped the edge of the counter. They're rewriting history. They're trying to establish a basis for retroactive termination, she said. Make it look like you were dismissed for cause, not downsizing. I thanked her and hung up. My hands shook. Camille was furious when I told her. They're playing dirty now. This means they're scared, but this also means we need to escalate. To who? To someone who can make noise. We reached out to Sandra again, and this time we gave her everything. Within 72 hours, she published a follow-up. It wasn't just an article, it was an exposé. From Mentor to Target, new files show Axton and Holt retaliation tactics against whistleblower. This time, the response wasn't just online whispers. This time, it hit Wall Street blogs, investor forums, whistleblower advocacy accounts. One hedge fund that held Axton stock tweeted a demand for internal accountability, and that's when something changed. Carla reappeared. She called me late. I was half asleep, the TV murmuring in the background. I have something, she said, her voice brittle but clear. It's a recording of Nathan from a prep call 2 weeks ago. I sat up. He didn't know I was on the line. He thought it was just him and one of the consultants. He says the numbers don't. Need to make sense to the investors. Just to the board. Do you have it? I emailed it to Camille 10 minutes ago. I also blind copied Sandra. Carla, I said softly, this changes everything. I hope so, she whispered, because I think they know it was me, and I'm not sure how much time I have left here. The next morning, Camille called. She'd reviewed the file. It's gold. It's willful deception, Margaret. It proves Nathan knew the numbers were fiction and encouraged it. We knew what to do next. Camille reached out to a contact at the Justice Department quietly, discreetly, and the word that came back was the one we hadn't dared say aloud yet. Criminal fraud, obstruction, securities violations. And suddenly, the narrative shifted. They weren't just trying to destroy my reputation anymore. They were trying to cover their own tracks before the house burned down. The Justice Department didn't respond with headlines. They responded with silence, the kind that moves underground and shakes the floor before anyone hears a thing. Camille called it the quiet turn. First, a low-level request for metadata confirmation from the SEC liaison. Then, a follow-up asking for exact version histories of certain spreadsheets, particularly the Q3 forecast Nathan presented to the board. They're triangulating, Camille said, building their own timeline from our structure. This is the part where we don't blink. But I was already blinking, just not outwardly. Inside, the fear had shape. I started checking my locks twice, jumping when my phone buzzed, not because I doubted what we were doing, but because I finally understood how real the stakes were. Then on a Thursday morning, I got a call from a blocked number. I didn't answer, but the voicemail that followed played in my head for hours. It was Roland, his voice colder than I remembered, but unmistakable. Margaret, I don't know what you think you're doing, but I suggest you consider the damage you're doing to your own name. You're hurting a lot of good people. Think hard before this goes further. I played it again and again. Camille told me not to respond, that it was bait. I didn't, but I saved it and added it to the file. That same afternoon, Carla called, this time in tears. They pulled me into a closed-door meeting, she said. 3 directors, no HR, no witnesses. They didn't threaten me directly, but they made it clear I'm being evaluated for realignment. What does that mean? It means they're getting ready to fire me. I couldn't stand it anymore. Watching good people get ground down while the liars in silk suits whispered about shareholder value. I want to speak, I told Camille that night. I want to go on camera. Not just quotes in print, video, my face, my words. Camille hesitated. Are you sure? They're already destroying my name. Let them try while I look them in the eye. She nodded. Then we do it smart. You control the interview. Sandra handles the editing, and I review the release. Sandra agreed without pause. She arranged for a local documentary crew, one she trusted. and booked a quiet studio outside of the city. I sat beneath the lights 2 days later, hair pulled back, suit pressed, hands folded in my lap, and for the first time I told the story aloud. No legalese, no charts, just truth. How I'd mentored a man who never respected me. How I watched him rise on my back, how I warned Roland. How I kept records not out of paranoia but survival, how I watched the numbers shift, how I was erased and then blamed. Sandra asked the CEO final question with quiet reverence. Why did you come forward knowing what they do to you? I paused, then said, because silence doesn't protect you, it just protects them. The video was posted on 3 platforms the next day. It spread fast. It wasn't just a corporate whistleblower story anymore, it was human. And once the public saw my face, heard my voice, the tide began to shift. Former employees started reaching out. A retired analyst, a former assistant, a temp from 4 years ago, who said she once shredded altered reports at Nathan's request. The stories weren't proof yet, but they were cracks in the wall. And one of those cracks came with a name, Darren West, an internal auditor, still employed, still quiet, but apparently he'd seen the falsified ledgers weeks ago. Camille looked up from her notebook and smiled slightly. If he flips, it's over, but that also meant something else. If they found out he was talking, they might try to shut him down the way they tried with me. And this time, we had to get ahead of it. It took 3 days to get Darren West to meet us. Camille had reached out through an intermediary, a former compliance officer who trained Darren years ago. At first, he refused. Then he agreed to a brief anonymous call. Finally, he agreed to a meeting, but only in person and under the condition that no recordings were made. We met at a park near the city outskirts, cold wind whipping through empty baseball fields. Darren arrived wearing a hooded jacket, cap pulled low, eyes scanning like he expected someone to be following. I can't stay long, he said, barely sitting on the bench beside us. Camille nodded. We understand, but we know what you've seen. The ledgers, the overwritten audit trails, the missing review logs from Q3. He didn't respond right away, just kept staring at his hands. I'm not a hero, he said quietly. I've got 2 kids in school, a wife who doesn't even know this is happening. I'm not asking you to blow up your life, I said, but I was nearly ruined. Carla is about to be. You know what's happening in there. His eyes finally met mine. They deleted internal memos, Margaret. Whole chains of them, board prep notes, audit certifications, all gone. I saw the files disappear from the archive myself and Nathan's name. It's in the metadata every time. Camille leaned in. Will you sign an affidavit? He hesitated. I'll lose my job. You might, she said. But if you don't and they go down, you'll go with them. Silence doesn't protect you anymore. That landed. His shoulders sank. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a thumb drive. This is all I've got, the last backups I made before they locked. Me out. Camille took it like it was made of glass. I'll think about the affidavit, Darren added. But if anything happens to me, I want my name clear. We promised it would be, and we meant it. Back at Camille's office, she and Sandra went to work. The drive contained more than we'd hoped. Internal audit memos showing flag discrepancies, meeting logs where Nathan overruled controls, and one explosive PDF that made Camille sit back in her chair, eyes wide. Look at this, she said, turning the screen to me. It was a calendar invite, a private call between Nathan and 2 external consultants just 3 days before my termination. The subject line read, Margaret exit plan timing messaging. There it was, cold, planned, deliberate. They hadn't just replaced me, they had conspired to erase me. Camille picked up her phone. This goes to DOJ now. No delays. Sandra, meanwhile, prepped a 3rd feature. She wanted to release it in 48 hours. This time naming names, quoting from Darren's files, and showing the coordination behind the smear campaign. We're nearing the end, she told me, but that's when it gets ugliest. She was right. The next morning, Camille's car was keyed outside her home. That same night, Carla called from a motel. They'd put her on immediate leave and revoked her system access. They're not even pretending anymore, she said. I'm staying off grid for a while. And then came the email sent to my public contact form unsigned. Stop now. You've said enough. Walk away or we'll destroy what's left of you. I read it 3 times. Then I forwarded it to Camille and hit delete. No reply, no fear, only forward. Because now the evidence was undeniable. The lies were mapped. And their exit plan, it was about to become ours. The final article, published on a Friday morning just after dawn. It carried no dramatic headline, no stylized graphics, just 5 words in bold. They knew they did it. Sandra's piece ran long and unflinching. It named Nathan Axton, Roland Axton, the board members who quietly approved doctored reports, and even the private consultants who had helped draft them. It embedded screenshots from Darren's files, quotes from Carla, verified voice logs from Nathan, and most damning of all, the calendar invite showing the coordinated plan to remove me and mislead investors. The fallout was immediate. By noon, Axton and Holt's public stock was placed on a voluntary trading halt. By evening, the board had called an emergency meeting confirmed by a leak to a Business Wire service. The firm issued a generic statement. "We are reviewing these allegations seriously." But the press knew, the public knew, and most importantly, the Department of Justice knew. Camille and I sat in her office that night, neither of us speaking, just the low hum of her old desktop and the soft, persistent tapping of rain against the window. "We did it," I said finally. "No," she corrected gently. "We're doing it. Indictments haven't been issued. Testimony hasn't been taken. This isn't the end. It's just a turn." I nodded. She was right. But still, something inside me eased. That weekend, Darren was placed on paid administrative leave. A subtle but telling move. The company trying to quiet him without punishing him outright. Carla, fearing for her safety, formally resigned and moved temporarily out of state with her children. Sandra, meanwhile, hired private security after receiving a second anonymous threat. As for me, I stayed still. I went back to cooking my own meals, to taking slow morning walks again, to calling my sister once a week just to talk about nothing. One afternoon, Camille called with the update we'd waited for. The DOJ had opened formal proceedings. A grand jury was being convened. Subpoenas were on the table. And yes, Roland and Nathan were both on the list. "You'll be asked to testify," she said, "but you won't be alone." I laughed quietly. It's strange. I should feel scared again. "But I don't, because you've already lost everything they could take," she said, "and you're still standing." The week I received my official request to testify, I bought a new jacket. Not because I needed one, but because I wanted to walk into that room with my head high, my name intact, and my voice ready. Before the hearing, I got one final message. A handwritten letter, no signature. I recognized the handwriting. It was from Roland. "Margaret, none of this was meant to go this far. I did what I thought I had to. I hope in time you can understand that. R." I folded it once, burned it in Camille's fireplace that same night. Forgiveness is a heavy thing. Sometimes silence is the only mercy we can afford. The hearing itself was clinical. Fluorescent lights, neutral walls, microphones that caught every breath. I told the truth. Every detail, every date, every name. I did not waver. I walked out lighter. Weeks passed. Then came the headline. DOJ files criminal charges against Axton and HOL executives in $320 million fraud case. Roland stepped down. Nathan vanished from public life. A dozen employees were suspended pending further investigation. The company issued a formal apology to its stakeholders, but never to me. It didn't matter because I knew who I was, and more importantly now, so did the